Hello and welcome to another episode of Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey from the Missouri Sierra Club. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about a proposed coal ash landfill in Springfield, Missouri. And we've got two great guests who will help us understand what's going on there. Let me introduce them to you. Starting to my far left, Dr. Judy Dasovich from Springfield. Thanks for being with us, Judy.
Thank you for having me.
And then Jennifer Conner from Monett,
Yes.
Pierce City area in Lawrence County. Thanks for being with us,
Thank
Jennifer.
you for having me.
So let's jump right into it. And let's start with the perspectives and professional backgrounds that you bring to this. And let's start with you, Judy. What's your professional background and how does that inform how you look at this issue?
I've been an internal medicine physician for over 30 years. I have a very up close and personal feel for how illness affects not only individuals, but their families and their communities. And this certainly, among other things, is a health issue.
Okay, so you've been a medical doctor
for over 30 years, yes.
Why is coal ash a health issue? Isn't it just ashes?
Yeah. The first reason, or the main reason, is because it is full of heavy metal toxins. These things are poisons. Things like mercury, arsenic, lead, there are several others, but those are the ones people are most familiar with. We've known since the 1800s that mercury is toxic to the brain, toxic to the spinal cord. We certainly know that they're lead the same way, just the way we've had to clean up lead paint, get lead out of gas. It is also toxic to the nervous system. All of these things affect many different organs, but certainly children and unborn children are even more susceptible to the toxicities of these poisons. And I worry about the cancer that it causes, certainly in an inhaled form. I worry about the respiratory disease, but I particularly worry about all the neurologic effects, IQ, dementias, degenerative diseases that we know that these toxins can cause. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Mad Hatter from Lewis Carroll, the Mad Alice in Wonderland. The Mad Hatter was mad because he worked with mercury, and he wrote that in the mid 1800s. So we've known for years that this is a problem. These things are problems.
For our viewers in St. Louis, they'll be very familiar with lead poisoning because of the incidence of lead poisoning of children from lead because of all the lead paint in this town.
And from a medical standpoint, it's well accepted that there is no safe level of lead. Even the tiniest amount of lead is toxic to the nervous system, and particularly to the nervous system of children, infants, and fetuses.
Okay, well, you obviously bring a lot of professional experience to this. Jennifer, how about you?
Well, I worked for the Missouri Department of Natural Resources for 5.5 years. I worked in hazardous waste enforcement, and I worked in soil and water conservation program. So I have a background in understanding intimately what these toxins do and how susceptible our groundwater is to them.
And when you say groundwater, what makes this area problematic?
So Southwest Missouri is characterized by karst topography. And karst is defined as a very permeable rock. It's also what gives the Ozarks its charisma. You have the springs, you have caves, you have sinkholes. But this highly permeable rock is very susceptible. Underneath you have a layer of groundwater, and groundwater is where most people in Southwest Missouri get their drinking water. And because of the permeability of the rock, the water underneath is highly susceptible to any surface contamination.
So because karst is like Swiss cheese and there's a lot of holes in it, then whatever you dump on the surface goes down, and then when your well pulls it back up and you drink it.
That is correct.
In a nutshell.
Correct.
Okay. Given that, what is City Utilities in Springfield suggesting that they want to do with their coal ash waste? And Judy, let me pitch that one to you.
Well, City Utilities has a new coal-fired power plant built in 2010 on the southwest side of town called the John Twitty Energy Center. They anticipate that they will need more disposal of that coal ash that is produced when coal is burned within the next 5 years or so. And they propose as the best and cheapest way to do that is to put a landfill right on that land where the power plant happens to be. They, as is the Missouri regulation, they submitted a preliminary site investigation to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and for several sites on the John Twitty at the John Twitty Energy Center. The DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, says this can't happen. This is a dangerous spot to do it. They gave it a severe rating, and it's severe means there is a high potential for catastrophic collapse. And the problem is that city utilities didn't like that answer. And so they went back and asked DNR several more times. The answer was the same. No, this is just plain too dangerous. And so what they did, there is a representative, happens to be my state representative, Lincoln Huff, who has gotten campaign finance contributions from a trade organization called MAMU, Missouri Alliance for Municipal Utilities. City utility ratepayers pay that organization, MAMU, $88,000 in annual dues. That money has been used by MAMU to fund Lincoln Huff's election campaign. I don't like that, even if I agreed with what the candidate did. What this particular representative, Lincoln Huff, did was slip in a bill literally at the last minute on the last day of the 2013 session that exempted city utilities retroactively from having to abide by that DNR decision. In other words, they did not have to abide by the preliminary site investigation.
So the professional geologists who work for the state of Missouri said this is the wrong place to put a coal ash landfill, and then politicians that owed city utilities were able to step around that public safeguard.
Absolutely.
Now, as a former DNR staffer, did you ever see political interference to try and stop the DNR from doing its job?
Definitely. That was always an issue at DNR. In this case, I'd like to reiterate what Judy said and quote the investigation. A registered geologist said that this area has a significant potential for catastrophic collapse. A registered geologist who put his official seal on this report said that. That's huge. You don't do that arbitrarily. And yet they're able to move forward because they lobbied, because they had a bill written so that they could disregard the scientific findings and move forward.
So as the state of Missouri, we employ professional geologists to make sure that science-based decisions are made in this situation, and that person whose job is to protect the public interest said there's a high likelihood of catastrophic collapse, don't go here.
That is correct.
And then that was overruled by this political workaround that CU and Representative Lincoln Huff engineered.
That is correct.
Well, I think that shows the need for people to get involved. And there's a great example. We're going to see a short film about a big mobilization of Americans who want to see action on climate change. There was, I know, a group from Southwest Missouri that also attended that event in New York City last summer. Let's take a look at this short film.
Hundreds of thousands took to the streets of New York today, demonstrating for action on climate change.
As many as 400,000 people turned out in New York City Sunday for the People's Climate March. The turnout far
The alarm bells keep ringing. Our citizens keep marching. We cannot pretend we do not hear them. We have to answer the call.
Hello and welcome back to Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey from the Missouri Sierra Club. On today's episode, we have two guests who are talking about a proposed coal ash landfill in Springfield, Missouri. Our two guests, let me remind you, Dr. Judy Dasovich from Springfield and Jennifer Conner from Monett. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the first part of our show, we were talking about the coal ash landfill that City Utilities is proposing. Now, it's not cheap for City Utilities to do what they're doing. Judy, do you know ballpark how much City Utilities is spending in terms of ratepayer money on this, assessing this site, which our state geologist said is dangerous?
Well, the next step that they weren't supposed to go on to, but are through this legislative fiat, is the detailed site investigation. They have contracted with an engineering firm in Jefferson City called Gradell Engineering for $4.8 million to do further investigation of the John Twitty site that we already know is dangerous, too dangerous to site the coal ash landfill on. The whole point of a preliminary site investigation is not to waste time and money on an area that is obviously not suitable. And there was absolutely no question, given the scientists' evaluation, that, I mean, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't even close. This is given a rating of severe, high likelihood of catastrophic collapse. Those are very strong words. And there is no known way to mitigate toxic metals that get into our water. Jennifer was telling me on our way here to St. Louis that the deep Ozarks aquifer covers a 4-state area. This is not just a Springfield issue. So it's not just about Wilson's Creek or James River or Table Rock Lake. We're talking about the drinking water for a 4-state area.
And by 4 states, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas,
Missouri, correct.
Now, we've used the word aquifer a couple times. Jennifer, help us out for the people in TV land who are wondering, what's an aquifer?
All right, so an aquifer is an underground layer of rock that is saturated with water that can then be brought to the surface. So it's basically water that you drink if you get your drinking water from underground, which most people in Southwest Missouri do get their drinking water from underground.
Okay, so when you have a well and you drill down, you're only going to get water if you're tapping into an aquifer.
That is correct. And Springfield is unique, as Judy spoke to. We have the Springfield aquifer underneath Springfield, which is a very shallow aquifer, but underneath that is the Ozark aquifer, and that aquifer does stretch through a 4-state area. And that's where most people get their drinking water.
And how far down is the Ozark aquifer?
I can't give you the exact number as to how far down it is, but it is a very deep aquifer as opposed to the Springfield aquifer.
So hundreds of feet likely.
Correct.
So as Judy was saying, if that aquifer hundreds of feet below the ground got polluted with mercury and lead, it's not like you could pump it up and clean it and put it back down.
Definitely not. The way karst works is, because there's this underground network of caves and springs and these intricate pieces of geology at work, groundwater is very hard to track. So if there was a collapse underneath the landfill, the water is moving in all different directions. It's very unpredictable. So not only would it be hard to track where the contamination migrated, it would be difficult, perhaps impossible, to be able to mitigate or remediate any material like toxins like mercury or lead that gets into our drinking water.
I know there's an aquifer in Metro St. Louis on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River, where the Illinois version of the DNR investigated it and said, okay, the groundwater is contaminated with coal ash, and their solution was to say, we'll just have nobody ever use this particular aquifer again because it's polluted and we can't clean it, and so we'll just close it until.
But how are
the
you
end of
going to
time.
do that for a 4-state area?
Right, exactly.
And John, I would like to say that we met, several of us met with a fellow named Roddy Rogers who works for City Utilities, and he is their water specialist. Am I correct about that? And we asked him, and he was telling us, well, we can do this safely, and we're obviously quite skeptical about that claim. And we said, well, just what if there was a collapse and these poisons and these heavy metal toxins did get into our groundwater? How do you mitigate that? Is there any mitigation for that? Like there is possibly for, say, oil spills. There is some technology to, I mean, it's not saying it's a good thing, but there's at least some technology that mitigates it. And he said as far as he knew, there wasn't any. So that is City Utilities' water expert who is telling us that he is not aware of any mitigation. That we had that conversation 3 months ago, and he said that if he found any way to mitigate it, he would let us know. So far, we've not heard.
And he's saying the opposite of what our state geologist said, which is actually can't you can't say there's not going to be catastrophic collapse because it's karst topography. And I believe the DNR report had shown there'd been a number of sinkhole collapses on that site already.
That is correct.
And that is part of why they denied the site in the first place. Again, in that preliminary site investigation, that according to the communications manager at City Utilities, didn't cost anything. That's the whole point. You don't waste time and money pursuing a site with a detailed site investigation if it's not appropriate, if it's not safe. And this site is not safe. It is not appropriate.
So that goes back to the $4.8 million price tag.
Right. That's coming out of, I'm a CU customer, so it's coming out of my rates.
So every month you're writing a check to CU, and CU's going to divert $4.8 million to Gradell Engineering.
And what City Utilities will say, well, yes, $4.8 million is a lot of money, but it's even more money to deal with this in some other fashion. It's much more expensive. Well, catastrophic collapses that you can't mitigate that contaminate the groundwater for a 4-state area, I can't even begin. I don't think anyone can even begin to estimate the cost of that. It's also, I can tell you from experience, it is not cheap to be sick. Just put aside the suffering, just the economics of being ill, of not being able to work, of having to take care of a sick child with a neurodegenerative problem. That costs money too. So we have to include the external costs when we're talking about the safe disposal of toxic material. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap. But the alternative is even worse. And of course, that's exactly why many of us, including people at the Sierra Club, want to get beyond coal altogether so we don't have to deal with this issue of toxins in our water, potentially.
And didn't the Environmental Protection Agency recently put out rules that spoke to the karst issue?
They did, and my opinion is it's a very weak rule. There's absolutely no enforcement. Utilities are supposed to monitor, and the rule says, yes, you can build on karst, but it's not a good idea. And there are all sorts of, suggestions that they have about the best and the safest way to do it, possibly even some restrictions. That might be a little bit of a strong word. But they don't recommend it. They allow it, but they don't recommend it. And there was a lot of political pressure to make the rule weak, according to some people.
And really, it's not a rule if you have no regulatory authority.
Right.
It's a rule, but if you have...
There's no enforcement.
There's no
There's
enforcement.
The only enforcement is that private citizens like us, if we think there's a problem, we can bring a suit. You know, a lot of private citizens don't have the time or the money or the expertise to do that. And That's a pretty toothless rule.
Now, as I understand it, the Springfield City Council is supposed to oversee city utilities and keep city utilities honest. I also understand
At least their budget.
I understand there was a recent city council election in Springfield where this issue became the defining issue between two candidates, the incumbent and then the challenger, Mike Schilling, who's an environmental activist in town. How did that election play out?
Let you speak to that.
Well, we actually, a little background, we did go to City Council, the White River group of the Sierra Club went to City Council a year ago to bring this exact issue up. Why are we using ratepayer money to do a detailed site investigation on an area that we know is inappropriate? Is that in the budget? Can you get it out of the budget if it is? And the budget for city utilities got passed without comment or any answer to our questions.
So the city council was not doing its oversight?
Not in my opinion.
When it came to the voters, what did the voters do?
The people in Southwest Springfield, where Mike Schilling, that's who he represents, they had the experience just about exactly 2 years ago in October of 2013, where the fly ash chimneys malfunctioned at the John Twitty site and covered Southwest Springfield with, it looked like it had snowed in October, with white coal ash dust. City Utilities spokesman said there wasn't any health problems associated with that, and they did offer some mitigation in the form of a car wash. We think that's completely inadequate. And my point to several City Utilities people is that I got to think you didn't plan that malfunction, therefore it was an accident. I know you're not planning to have a problem with this new coal ash landfill inappropriately placed on karst, but gosh, accidents happened. There was just one in October 2013, and apparently the people in the southwest corner of the city remembered that when we've done some campaigning for Mike back in April. People were aware of this issue. We didn't have to educate them. Voters were aware. As a matter of fact, there was a smear campaign in the last week to try and smear Mike as being the tool of an environmental extremist organization. Didn't work. He won pretty handily.
Okay, well that's a great note to break on. So congratulations to all the voters there. Let's take a quick break. This community-based campaigning on environmental issues requires lots of individuals to get involved. We're going to watch a film that introduces us to some of those individuals around the country who are doing similar work. Let's take a look. Hello and welcome back to Green Time. Thanks for joining us for another episode. If you live in Southwest Missouri and you want to get involved, one simple way to do it is go to our Facebook page, Sierra Club White River Group. Again, Facebook, Sierra Club White River Group. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.